So, Apostles of Mercy, the third book in Lindsay Ellis's Noumena series, has arrived. And Lindsay Ellis is an author who always manages to be entertaining and readable. Sometimes the books can be janky, the writing can be interesting. There's a lot of inserted references to the Cheesecake Factory, regardless of whether it's needed at that moment or not. But this is a person who always writes with a lot of personality and individual flair. So first up, we're going to divide this review into the non-spoiler section in the beginning and then spoilers later on. So at the end of the second book, we're left very unsure of how the third book is even going to begin, because Cora decides to abandon humanity along with her alien friend Ampersand. And when the book opens up, when the third book opens up, it almost feels as if it's been retconned or not happened, because very little seems to have changed from the previous book. Cora continually thinks, oh, soon we're going to have to leave everyone behind, but you had already decided this pretty firmly at the end of the last book, so it's a bit of a strange start. The death of Kava in the previous book also colors much of this book. A lot of the character development between Cora and the new person Paris is wrapped around the death of Kava. There's even a big plot resolution based around his memorial at the end of the book. And it feels a little strange because while he was important to the previous book, it seems like the entire universe has bent around this one character. And it seems a little strange that so much time in the new book is devoted to remembering a character who only showed up in the second book and who is no longer even here. So the main plot of this book revolves around the introduction of a second or sister species to the main aliens. And I think this is a good idea. It was hinted at in the first book, and what it does is that it gives the series a lot more actual plot meat that it can work with, because when your main thread is, oh, eventually the main aliens are going to come and kill everyone on Earth, well, you can only stretch that out for so many books before it becomes, well, are they going to arrive? Are they not going to arrive? And so introducing the sister species, which is much more cannibalistic, and, has more of an actual relation to humanity, it gives more for the characters to do and allows for more themes to be explored. It also allows for a bit of a genre shift, because previously the book series had been very speculative and political, and were based on kind of thoughts of alien personhood. And now you're able to bring in almost the difference between Aliens 1 and Aliens 2. You're able to bring in more of a kind of horror thriller element because you have these more dangerous aliens, and but then it brings on themes of understanding these aliens and their own plight and how they themselves are misunderstood and prejudiced and biased against. And along with that, there's another big thematic shift in this book where previously a lot of the books had been about alien personhood and understanding them. That was definitely the main theme of the second book and the main political plot going on. Whereas now there's much more of a theme of American jingoism. You have the CIA going into other countries and kind of taking over from the local people, covering things up, and it's a lot more of that American exceptionalism that's being discussed. Also, to further compare the book to Alien and that series change, the story has become much more faster paced in terms of going places and locations. In the first book, the characters, their journey is fairly important. After Cora is initially kidnapped by Ampersand, it's a long journey for her to get to the base with the other aliens, and from that point on, her trying to get to Obolus. Meanwhile, in this book, everything has been sped up quite significantly. Suddenly, everyone is jumping across the world from New York to Japan to Cambodia. Korra at one point is kidnapped in Belarus and then brought all the way back to Southeast Asia. The characters now, their location doesn't really matter, and they can kind of be wherever they want. It's an acceleration of the technology, and it's almost gone to more of an espionage thriller where characters are, you need to go to Yemen now, you need to go to Japan tomorrow. But then that's contrasted because the characters of Paris and Nicola are sequestered in one area for a while, and suddenly even them getting 2 or 3 feet in one direction becomes a major plot point for them. And to talk about Paris, it's interesting her character function, because previously in the last book you had Kava, who was the love interest of Korra, and in killing him off, it's clear that Lindsay Ellis still wanted to explore sexuality, and she still wanted there to be a romantic interest to Korra, and so she brings in Paris, and in some ways Paris has to have similar plot roles and character traits to Kava. She has to get along with Nicola because that's kind of the branching B story. She needs to be, inquisitive. She needs to be somewhat anti-authoritarian, and also a pop culture referencing contrast to Korra. And so she manages in some ways to have her own character in the book. I don't think that she is just a carbon copy of Kaveh, but it is interesting that Kaveh is written out and then suddenly a new character comes in this book who is functionally the same. She's not an identical character, but she has the same role in the story. This book continues to develop the relationship between Korra and Ampersand, and you see them becoming a lot closer. So previously in the first book and somewhat in the second book, you have them communicating through a kind of a pseudo-emotional high language. It's them able to talk to each other without talking to each other. And it was described in those books as being quite crude, quite rudimentary, and it's not their fully being able to mind meld, such as Ampersand's species normally is. And so this book has several more scenes and is primarily, their relationship is about trying to be able to mind meld in this high language communication. And in there, Lindsay Ellis brings up an interesting idea, which is trying to know the unknowable. Ampersand's mind to us is incomprehensible. It's not the human mind as we can perceive it. And so how does Korra interface with that? And there's a bit of Lovecraftian eldritch abomination brought into the mix. And overall it works very well, and it also leads to one of the horniest scenes in the entire book. And yes, this is an extremely horny book. There is an extended scene where lesbian sex is described from the perspective of an alien who doesn't really understand sex at all. Ampersand the alien learns the power of erotic touch. Characters are continually being kidnapped and tied up in compromising situations. And yes, I fully support this horniness. Going into spoilers, I think one problem or thing that doesn't work quite so well in the book is there's a resistance to character death. We're 3 books in, and there are some characters who are more important to the story, there are some characters who are less important to the story. And many of these characters are continuously put into life or death situations, or situations where we think, oh, they have to have died, and then they don't. So when the plane that's carrying Nicola and Paris and Korra's aunt explodes, the aunt survives. She's miraculously saved. But she didn't have to survive. She could have died because she doesn't really do anything in any of the books that properly affects the story. She rarely interacts with our main characters, so it's not as if she provides important character interactions or some sort of thematic mirroring in the story. She's just there. And so to have a fake out death, I don't understand it. And likewise later on, when Paris is injected by the virus that the sister species is trying to concoct to wipe out humanity, it's just fixed. It's fixed 5 pages later, and it doesn't matter. She never infects anybody, she doesn't die. It seems like arbitrary stakes that are then easily resolved, and so I don't know why those stakes were introduced in the first place. Likewise, when Saul Kaplan has his redemptive sacrifice, shooting down the alien ship and then presumably dying himself, it turns out he didn't die, even though he could have. It's 3 books in, you can do that. And even when it's introduced that the crash left him paralyzed, Cora just comes in and says that Ampersand, as Christ, will resurrect him and give him back the ability to walk. And while that doesn't break the rules of the story, because it's already been introduced earlier in the book that Ampersand is a master doctor and could easily do this, why does Saul have a moment where he redemptively sacrifices himself and then, oh, there are actually no consequences and, you know, he's just going to be just fine? When you introduce these stakes, you are allowed to actually have characters die off who are not entirely vital to the story, and that can actually increase the tension, but you don't get that increase of tension if everyone has magical plot armor. I can understand that she didn't want to kill off Paris after introducing her, especially because she didn't want to just mirror the death of Kava in the last book. But if everyone is going into constant life or death situations and surviving, then there's no point in writing the life or death situations. It just cheapens them. You can write a situation where the characters are not in mortal danger. But regardless of any criticisms I may have of the book, it's an easy page turner. I read it all in 2 days. I was instantly sucked into the story, and you always want to know what's happening next. And I'm really looking forward to the next book. I think that it's clear from the ending of this the direction that Lindsay Ellis wants to go in the next book, at least some of the themes that she wants to explore, and I trust her to always deliver a highly entertaining experience.